G'day everyone and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap brought to you by Crowcast. Of course, week two of the finals have been and gone, and it was a fantastic effort by the umpires in both matches. But to help us get through it, let's get into the intro and then we'll introduce our panellists. G'day everyone and welcome to Crowcast Weekend Wrap Finals Round 2, or Week 2 I should say. Happy Father's Day to everyone who's joined us tonight and everyone who's listening on YouTube and also picking us up on Discord and even Twitch and also the Spreaker live audio. Hope you had a great day everyone, and Macca, hope you had a great day too mate. How you going?
Oh, a bit overwhelming, mate. All a bit too much, but, we'll recover.
And Nick?
I'm here.
Did you spend Father's Day with your beloved father?
No, I got a phone call from him going, "Where are you?"
Right.
Like, Happy Dad's Day. No, still a little bit under the weather because as we were talking earlier, I had my first jab on Friday, but all good.
I'm leaving that alone. Welcome, as I said, to everyone who's.
I hadn't even gone there yet, Steve. That's how slow I am tonight.
G'day to everyone who's joined us on Discord and YouTube. Don't forget, on Discord tonight, if you want to join us with some live interaction, get around the live studio audience, stick your hand up, and would be happy to have you on board. Lots to talk about tonight. A couple of, one really, really good finals match and one not so good finals match, both heavily impacted, in my opinion, by the umpires. But what did you think, Mac?
Well, I think where you come from, and whether you're a Victorian or not, the Victorian team or not, seems to be have some influence with the umpires. I think in both games, I thought the Victorian team was very heavily favoured, and I don't mean that they were like a robbery thing, but I mean, but every time there was a dubious decision, and you get maybe 6, 8, 10 of them a game, they all went one way.
Nick, how'd you see it?
Oh, yes, very much favouring Victorian sides. How the hell did that umpire miss the throw from Dangerfield when clearly you can see the umpire in the vision there? Even if he wasn't in the perfect vision, which he was, you can still tell that was not a legal disposal out. And they end up getting a goal out of it.
They did.
That's the problem, is when they're letting things like that go. And then I think it was only about two minutes later, they called a throw for GWS. Oh, so you're calling it for one side but not the other. Okay.
And there was so many pushes called for Giants that weren't called for Geelong, and it was horrible. And the Lions-Bulldogs game was similarly horrible, inconsistent, and if I was a Lions supporter, I'd be throwing my hands up in despair, honestly, because it was free kick Bulldogs, in my opinion. Yeah,
they have every right to be upset, I think.
I saw some stat, and correct me if I'm wrong on the actual numbers, but apparently throughout this final series, frees 4 Victorian teams and against and 4 interstate sides, 66 to 38, I think.
Yeah, that's about it. Yep.
And these are the top sides for the year. You would actually think, they're all playing similar styles, etc. Yep. Yes, everything gets heightened and lifted in the finals. They tend to be a little bit more ticky touchwood, where they'd normally let things go. But if you're actually saying these teams are fairly even, which is what we've actually seen throughout this year, which means you'd think they'd infringe about evenly, not half one way, not
Look,
double for one side.
The icing on the cake was that blocking free against McInerney in that last few minutes against Western Bulldogs, which basically gave the Bulldogs possession when they needed to get the ball forward, and they'd been losing the ruck all night. And the umpire just said, "Here you go, have a forward 50 entry and see what you can make of that." I could not believe it. Could not believe it.
He really did do it though, but
no, he didn't. He mistimed his jump. It wasn't a block.
He completely mistimed it. But he looked at. As soon as your eyes look at your opponent,
that's ridiculous.
You're done.
That's ridiculous because if you mistime your run, you have to reset yourself, and the first thing you do as a ruckman is to see where your bloody opponent is. It's not a block.
Precisely. Yeah, precisely. But the umpires are taught that if they take their eyes off the ball, because they're being taught by people who actually don't know football, then it's a free kick.
It's a shocker. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree.
We could probably go on all night about that, but let's not make it an umpires podcast. Now, Nicky and Macca. I assure people that I haven't been drinking all day today.
No, not at all.
We've only got 2 matches to talk about, so I'm setting us up for a 1-hour podcast. What do you reckon?
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So, first game, let's have a look at the Cats versus the Giants, shall we? As I just zoom in here, and it was Geelong 15-13, 103, 35-point winners in the end to the Giants, who I just think didn't have enough petrol left in the tank. 10 goals, 8, 68, and they marched through to a preliminary final against Melbourne next week.
Yeah, look, I think this game was actually lost even before the first bounce. Toby Green put a great big hole in it. And then when they lost Hogan up from full forward, they really had no centre-half forward. They had no full forward. That's GWS I'm talking about, obviously. Yep. And then Leon Cameron compounded it by taking Taranto out of the midfield, who I still believe is his best midfielder, put him up in the forward line, and he had no impact up there at all.
I couldn't understand that move.
Yeah, and he left him there until I think it was the last quarter, which was a poor coaching by Leon Cameron in that respect. Having said that, I don't think that GWS really had a genuine chance, as I said, once Green and once Hogan went. It started off, first quarter was competitive, but Geelong got a couple of goals, and then they held that margin up till half-time. But it was the third quarter when they actually broke away, and they went to a 5-goal lead and eventually won by just under 6 goals. And the trio forward, that the big vaunted trio, actually worked this time, and you had Hawkins kicking 5, and you had Cameron got 2, and Rowan got 2, and they got 9 goals just from that alone. So, they had. If you have a look at the entries were identical in terms of numbers. I think it was 49 entries each into the forward lines, and one team had players that could actually score, and the others had they didn't have a forward line, as I said, and. Look, really, I would be not with Taranto being so quiet up forward and not scoring. Keep him on the ball, at least push the ball down them, and somebody may get a score. But no, I think on paper it was lost before the game. That's my view, anyhow.
Yep. Let's have a look at some head-to-heads. Geelong 355 disposals to 325. Very kick heavy in that number, 223. Kicks to 132 handballs. Both teams had 49 inside 50, so I think it was more about the quality of ball getting into the Geelong forward line than anything else. Geelong were also far more efficient with the ball, 75% opposed to 67, and obviously more efficient inside 50 as you'd expect. Free kicks 24 to 17. Geelong slightly favoured in the ruck contest. I thought Mumford looked tired and... no surprise to see him hang up the boots. He played a lot more than what was expected this year, but the Giants will be on the hunt for a ruckman. So Kieran and Riley, get your managers on the phone. Clearances were pretty even, notwithstanding. 10-9 in the centre and 31-34 around stoppage. Possessions, contested possession fairly even, but uncontested possession, Geelong up by 24 or thereabouts. Won a little bit more of the ball on the outside and controlled play in general. I thought a bit more than GWS. Those possession heat maps are quite interesting. You can see Geelong dominated their possessions around, like, was very even spread, whereas GWS was quite concentrated through the middle of the ground. I haven't seen that configuration before. What else have we got here? Tackles. GWS certainly didn't give up. 68 tackles to 59. Tackles inside 50, 15-7 in the Giants' way as well. So statistically, there wasn't much in it from a head-to-head perspective, but it just seemed like, in my opinion, Geelong just were more settled with ball in hand and were able to control the play, whereas the Giants, I think, were a little bit more rushed and got their scores from individual efforts more so than good team play.
Yeah, couldn't argue with any of that.
Could you,
Yeah,
Nick?
I mean, they absolutely played into Geelong's hands with the way they were rushing it to bring it forward and just bombing it in, which on that slightly wider ground suits Geelong better. And it was just frustrating to watch their continual bomb into the forward line. And you're right, Macca, they absolutely lost it before the game with just the loss of Hogan. I mean, Green, just purely on his own, without Green there, I thought they weren't going to win. But with Hogan going out and and how they set up was just wrong. Completely wrong.
I don't know whether they had a lot of choices, to be honest with you.
No.
But I would have made the move on Taranto a lot earlier.
Absolutely.
I don't know whether he was the right player to go down there, to be honest with you. And they lost so much out of the middle. He's been probably their most consistent midfielder all season, I would have thought. And to take that player out of your rotations and sit him up forward and have essentially no impact on the game for a large portion of the game, Mac and Nick. Again, evidence to me that Leon Cameron isn't up to it, and has been kissed on the backside by a fairy with an amazing list and a ton of concessions, and he hasn't been able to make that work. And I find it a bit gobsmacking that he's there for another 2 years, I think it is. But he won't win a flag with them.
I don't think so.
A quick look at some individual stats. Won't spend too much on this. Lockie Whitfield is an out-and-out champion. 34 disposals, didn't give up all game. 11 contestants.
I make one comment on Whitfield. He is an absolute champion. There's no doubt about it. And he looks like he does it so easy. And because he looks like he does it so easy, at times you think, well, why isn't he doing more? And which is a harsh judgment when you're judging the bloke who was probably their best player.
Yeah.
But he does disappear sometimes for a few minutes. But when he's...
Yeah, that's when he's on the bench.
No, I'm talking about even on the field. He sometimes just goes quiet for a couple of minutes. But anyhow, look, he was easily their best player, yeah.
A big indicator of Geelong's reconfiguration after last week was the amount of ball that Zach Tui got. He really assumed the role, in my opinion, of what's his name? Stewart, the guy that is out. Got 31 touches off running around off half-back and running around like an unregistered dog, really, probably assisted by the Giants' configuration up forward. But they're not going to have that luxury next week, but it worked for them against the Giants, and he was a good player, sweeping up across half-back.
He was no top player. He had a big influence on the game.
Yep. Menengola also played very well. He's one of those players that if he's up and about, things seem to go Geelong's way. Hopper was good for the Giants. Kelly also good for the Giants. De Boer, I thought, did a pretty reasonable job on Dangerfield for the most part and got 23 touches himself.
He also he got more touches than Danger did, and
Yeah.
as you know, Danger's possessions usually go to the other team anyhow. So no, I think he did an excellent job on him.
Yeah, Danger only with the 20 touches was relatively quiet, and it's going to be very interesting to see how he goes next week. Looked to be getting played up forward a fair bit, Dangerfield, for one reason or another. And you can see there, Taranto, 20 touches. What a waste. It's probably 10 down on as usual.
Yeah, no, absolute waste. He was wasted.
Yeah. Inquisitor in the chat says they're missing a fair stack of players. Yet you're absolutely right, Inquisitor. They were on a hiding to nothing. But I still don't rate Leon Cameron as a coach. I put him in the Chris Scott category, actually.
Yeah, I agree with both those comments.
Right. Look, and, I mean, Geelong did it without big contributions from Dangerfield and also Selwood. Selwood only with the 14 disposals and looking every much a man on his last legs. But the one for mine that was a worry for GWS is Caniglio. Only the 14 disposals as well. Hasn't his form gone south?
Well, he had injuries, of course.
Yeah.
Didn't he? He did an ACL.
Yeah.
The man was a star going back about 3 years ago. He was their number one player.
Yep.
And he was a champion, yeah. But since he's had that injury, no, he's not the same player. And whether it's a lack of confidence, a lack of belief, or whatever, but he just looks a very ordinary player now.
Yep. So, a pretty even performance by Geelong. I think they got their structure right. I think Giants made it easy for them and were relying on their stars to get them over the line, and I think that was just too big an ask in the end. So they bow out. Probably did well to get as far as they did given the topsy-turvy season that they had this year. But they're going to have to go to the world, the Giants. They're down a ruck. Argue whether they're potent enough up forward. And they seem to lack a bit of depth, surprisingly.
But on the other side, of the coin, though, they do have two young up-and-coming ruckmen who I think will end up being fairly good guys, and they're big guys. So Mumford will probably retire for the third time, and those guys will actually get a chance to play all season. That was the first point I was thinking about. And secondly, I read that they'd been on the road away from home, away from their partners for 73 days, and that in itself is a massive disadvantage.
Is it?
Well, I think you look for example for the match coming up with Port Adelaide. Port Adelaide are sitting there for 3 weeks. They've been other teams running all around Australia and doing this and doing that, and they've never had to leave home, never had to leave their beds, never had to leave their families, never had to leave their day-to-day things that they do. To them, they've had it easy.
Yeah, they still got to live in Geelong though. That's a disadvantage.
All right, let's go to the next one.
No, I get your point, Mac. I do. Western Bulldogs were disadvantaged too in the lead-up. They hardly got any time on the Gabba before the match, but they ended up getting up anyway. The Western Bulldogs winning in a very, very exciting match. Very exciting match. 11-13-79 to 11-12-78. The Lions would be bitterly disappointed to bow out, but to be perfectly honest with you, I think they're another team that through injury and misfortune haven't got a lot left in the tank, and I think both the GWS side and the Lions, had they got through this week, would have been steamrolled in preliminary finals.
Yeah, well, look, if you look at Brisbane, for example, they were missing two key forwards and good key forwards, and they were left really with Joe Danaher, who's rolling a dice. Is it going to be a 1 or a 6? You don't really know.
Yep.
And Charlie Cameron, who he did pretty well. He got a few goals. Definitely not his best game, but he played really well. But they had a lot of up forward, and they had a lot of attacks early, and didn't put the game away because, as I said, they were a bit light on. If you're going to get the Bulldogs anywhere, it's going to be in defence, I reckon. And but the Brisbane forward line had been weakened to that particular point with those two players out.
Well, plus
And,
the lad
you know,
that got belted in the scone by Lincoln McCarthy's knee. What was his name again?
Yeah.
oh, poor bastard, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
I do know you're talking about. I can't remember his name, but
Payne.
Gardner?
I'll look it up.
Payne.
Payne
Payne
that's
by
right,
name
Payne.
and Payne by experience.
Yeah, thanks, Rabbit. Payne. And, gee, that was a nasty one he copped.
See, that's 2 in 2 weeks.
And
They
that-
lost McStay last
Yeah.
week. Payne this week. And you're right, Mac. Western Bulldogs, sorry, Nick. Western Bulldogs were struggling even with a bit of a makeshift forward line for Brisbane. So that does show their vulnerability. Sorry, Nick, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to agree with make exactly the same point that it was, two tall players out of their forward lines for Brisbane in the 2 finals taken out by their own players.
Yeah. Well, the McCarthy one was very unlucky because everyone thought it was in the marking contest, but it was actually when he came down. And it was his legs swinging around as he hit the deck, and his knees just copped pain in the scone. So that was very unfortunate. And, Danaher's no good running out of the square. He needs to be up the ground. And unfortunately, with him up the ground, they had no tall timber. I thought the move of Harris Andrews forward in the last was excellent by Fagan. And it looked like it could actually do the job.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about it last week that he was atrocious down back.
Yeah.
And I think he was very lucky up to the point down back again this week that the midfields of Brisbane had actually done quite a good pressure job so that they weren't getting a lot of clean ball into the forward line. So it made it a bit easier for him because they couldn't go to those taller targets.
Yeah.
So I thought he was fairly ineffective, but the couple of times where they did get someone, he was just useless. You just saw him, one of the goals, he gave him 10 meters, behind him out the back. You don't do that to your forward. As a former fullback, I would have been yelling at him. So, oh my God, I would have wanted him off the ground.
But, the move forward, though, nearly did the job.
Yeah, nearly did the job. And, that's probably, he just seems to be a deer in the headlights when it comes to finals.
Yeah. Go on, mate.
I was just going to say, last week's game, and when the wet came, the Bulldogs really got their contested game going. And they carried them on this week, and I think if it had been a dry game all last week, I don't think the Bulldogs would have been as tuned for this type of game as they were, because it really was a very, very highly contested game. And as I said, the Bulldogs had got tuned for it. But having said that, when you look at all the umpiring decisions, which were very dubious, to lose by a point. Particularly with that one particular free kick that you mentioned before, Fee.
Okay.
Poor old Fagan, look, the poor old guy, he nearly cried on the boundary, and I felt sorry for him because you do a year's work and it goes down the drain. You knock your own players off the field. You do, and you keep going forward and not scoring, and yet you lose by 1 point, and you've had a lousy run from the umpire. Yeah, he had my sympathy. Having said that, I was probably in a way pleased that the Dogs won because I think they are more likely to be able to beat Port Adelaide than Brisbane. And although, unfortunately, it depends whether Bontempelli is going to play or not.
Yeah,
But,
that'll be an interesting one.
And Waitman will be out as well because he was subbed out under concussion.
I think they're going to try and get around that one by saying, and I don't know whether he was concussed or not, because
that's what he was subbed out for.
No,
he was subbed out.
Wasn't. He wasn't, Nicky. Get your facts right, mate. Get your facts right, mate.
What are they saying now?
He never had a test.
That's right. And they're going to try and get it on the basis, because if you saw the way he was animated barracking on the boundary after half time, he didn't look like he was a guy that had concussion to me.
Yeah, you can still do that. He's sitting down. He's not standing up too much.
No, he didn't get tested, so he's officially not under the concussion protocol. Of course, neither was Tom Diday, and I think there was one other case during the course of the season where, despite Diday passing concussion protocols, he was still not allowed to play. It's going to be interesting to see if the AFL colours of blue, white, and red actually mean the Western Bulldogs in this particular instance, because there's no way he should be playing, but I bet he does.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in your
that'll be.
campaign. I think because he is Victorian, I think he probably will. They may say, well, he looked very good after half time. Then he wasn't concussed.
You can still look like that, even being concussed. You don't. You do not mess with a player's head injury like that and send them back on a field. If you have this rule in place, which is to protect the players, then you protect the players.
Well, they did. They took him off.
No, but here's the thing. This is what hasn't been made enough of, in my view. Why didn't he get a concussion test? I thought that anyone that came off with a head knock, I thought there was a mandatory concussion test. Why wasn't he given a concussion test, Macca?
Well, for the very reasons that we're talking about it now.
Yeah, I know, but why haven't the if we didn't give Tom Diday a concussion test when he came off a couple of weeks ago, then we would have been fined 20 draft picks and our firstborn child. Why is it that no one is making anything of the fact that Cody Waitman didn't get a concussion test? Didn't have to go through protocols.
He's supposed to, because there's the vision of him hitting his head on the ground. Right. That's a mandatory concussion test, and if they don't do it, then the AFL is supposed to step in and do it.
It's too late. It's too late, because they've got to get a baseline as soon as possible after the incident. And what's supposed to happen is he comes off and they run him through the test based on his previous baseline to make sure that there's no sign of concussion. They never did that. And to me, that's an issue with duty of care. That's a breakdown of the medical staff at the Bulldogs. And I wouldn't mind betting that someone directed somebody to say, don't give him a concussion test, because that'll lock us into the 12-day turnaround.
I'll bet you're right. Yep, I'll bet money on it, being that you're right.
And if that is the case, then they need to be fined and he needs to be sat out.
Yeah, but it won't happen. Won't happen, Nick. Anyway, let's look at some head-to-head stats, and the big one for mine is the fact that the Lions actually went inside 50 14 more times than the Bulldogs, and therein lies the tail of the tape, in my opinion. They just couldn't get enough value for forward 50 entries. The quality of their forward 50 entries wasn't too bad, but for whatever reason, they just couldn't get blokes on the end of it. So in a game like that, with everything so tight, to get 14 more inside 50s and lose by a point, they'd be devastated. Because if you look at every other stat apart from their efficiency inside 50, you'll see that that's where they lost the game, except for this next one. Free kicks 19-28. Less said about that, the better.
I will pick on one Brisbane midfielder. McCluggage. He gets the ball, but my God, does he make stupid decisions in disposing of it into the forward line, or he hangs onto it for too long.
Missed a golden opportunity when he was running through into the forward line in that last quarter, and he didn't see that bloke out to the right of him. It was an easy give off. Yeah.
There was so, and that was the most blatant one, but there were other ones also when he was coming out of defence, he would stuff it up and turn it over and go back, and you can actually see on the vision there were other clearer players. He should have made decisions earlier, and I'm like, he can get the ball.
Yeah.
But, his disposal was frustrating me so much. Bet you it was he would have annoyed Fagan as well.
Yeah, I've got a very high opinion of McCluggage. He's a very, very good footballer. And
he's a good ball getter, Macca. A good ball getter.
He is a good player, and he's normally, his disposal generally around field is pretty good. But he does have the yips in front of goals when he's having set shots for goal. He's got a terrible record at kicking set shots. And he did have that one blemish you're talking about, where there was a player, I think it was on his left hand side.
On his right.
Right, he's right. He just parked all on his own. That's right, it was, yeah. And he should have given over to him. But overall, I thought he played a very good game. And but as you said, he may have also cost them the game as well. And you're right, Dean. They went forward so many times.
Yeah.
And I thought Lyons was guilty several times of trying to do these daisy cutter passes, which didn't hit the chest and so on. they had the opportunity to win the game in spite of all the negativities that went against them, like injured players, umpiring, and all the rest of it. They still could have done it, and
they could have,
and it just didn't happen.
No, and I think a lot of that was the fact that they didn't have Danaher as a length player playing high. He was playing deeper, and they just were forced to carry the ball further through the midfield, and it just made their entries sloppy. Because it's not the way they normally go about it. Hit-outs, 45-32. Clearances, though, Bulldogs 47-37. Now, given the dominance of McInerney, they really should have done better than that, in my opinion, around clearance. Possessions, pretty much the same. Bulldogs 10 up on contested. Brisbane about 15 up on uncontested possession. Turnover similar. Heat map similar. Marks 79-65 in Brisbane's favour, 12-6 inside 50. See, they've got a lot of stats in their favour in this game, and Chris Fagan, when he goes and looks over this stats sheet and has a look at some of the vision, he will be ruining a game that they really should have won. They really should have won this game, Mac.
Yeah, 100% agree. It was theirs to win, and they blew it.
Yep. Let's have a look at some of the individuals. McRae, Daniel, Bontempelli, all good games. McRae, 39 touches, if you don't mind, on a semi.
Yeah. Outstanding.
19
and
contested possessions.
Most of his find a man.
Yep. Well, 59% disposal efficiency suggests that might not have been the case, Mac, but nonetheless, he was very effective.
That's a lot of wild handballs, like out of packs and that. But when he's with his by foot, I think he's very accurate.
And it was really interesting because out of that midfield bunch, the one we didn't see a lot of was Treloar.
No, well, he didn't get a touch in the first quarter.
No. And he wasn't really noticed until the third.
No, that's right. He was very quiet. Daniel, when a team's going to start putting work into Caleb Daniel? 31 touches off, running around like an unregistered dog off half back and just tidying everything up like a little vacuum cleaner. A team needs to actually tag Caleb Daniel, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the funniest thing is you can actually see the Brisbane players stand off of him and let him take his time to get a kick away. It's like, why aren't you running up and pressuring him? Because when there were a couple of times they did do that, he didn't hit the target.
Mm.
And they had chances to turn the ball over.
Yeah.
But they kind of corral him in. It's like, I know he's short, but he's not going to run between your legs. Yeah. You can get close enough to actually pressure him.
Yeah. He's very good at getting very low, Caleb Daniel. I won't say that he ducks, but he makes himself very small, Caleb. But I just think teams need to actually work out that he gives them so much drive and direction off half-back that he needs to be checked. Yeah. Bontempelli was great, 29 touches, 16 and 13. And then, that's when we start seeing the Brisbane midfield of Neil, McCluggage, Lyons and Zorko all around the mid to high 20s. I don't think any of them had a standout. And what I do see in that group of four is just a lack of a little bit of silk and speed. And I think that's where Brisbane will be in the market this off-season, is to try and get a little bit of outside silk into that team and a little bit of speed through the midfield. You got Zorko, Lyons and Neil, none of them are quick. McCluggage is probably a little bit quicker, but still ungainly, I guess you'd say. A bit more bullocking, I suppose you'd say. They need someone with a bit of class on the outside, in my opinion, to just top that midfield off.
Yes, I agree with you, Fane, but they don't grow on trees. We need one too.
Yep, that's right.
It kind of felt a little bit like our midfield. It was very one-paced.
Very
almost
one-paced.
In a way.
Yep, very one-paced. Really good systems, Brisbane, in my opinion. Good systems, but can't break you open.
Yeah.
Like the Bulldogs or Richmond of old, or those sorts of teams that just break you open just by sheer will and pace and fanaticism. That's not really Brisbane. They did stick to their task very well, though. Robinson, I thought, was good in the second half. Daniel Rich was Daniel Rich, overrated All-Australian.
Yeah, just on Robertson, his ability for those balls that are bouncing around, etc., and things like this, his little tap downs and the control that he had, that was actually a delight to watch. I mean, he's a player who takes a step up in finals.
Not only that, Nick, but his ability to move in traffic was really on show. There was a couple of really nice sidesteps that he made during the course of that last quarter. And I thought,
really enjoyed his game.
Mitch, if you could only just get him around a little bit more. But look, of the rest, as I said, McInerney dominated the rucks, 40 hit-outs on his own without really Brisbane capitalising after quarter time. Charlie with a good contribution, 3 goals won, but only the 13 disposals, so was in and out of the game a bit.
It's interesting though that it's his first those 2 games. We say he's had good thing, but most of those goals are in the first quarter, and then he can't get anything after that. He's still around and he's still causing problems, but he actually doesn't score really after quarter time. Damaging scores.
You're on fire tonight, Nicky.
Thank you.
Someone will put her out. Because she had her first jab. Because she had her first jab on the weekend, Mac. That'll lift anyone. You
get lucky every Sunday,
I'll just ignore you two.
All right. Oh, Ned, stop whinging. It's a finals show. If you don't like it, bugger off. We are obviously going to talk about the finals, and we will now talk about the Crows. So just cool your heels, because the finals deserve to be talked about, and you can always tune in on Tuesday night for a bit of Crows chat. So back in your box. Everyone wants to be a bloody producer tonight. Anyway.
We're the ones with the controller.
Exactly. All right. So that's it. Now, next week, of course, we have 2 really good games. Melbourne v Cats at Optus Stadium, and Port v the Bulldogs at Adelaide Oval. And yes, Ned, I'm aware of what the show's called, and apparently the Crows didn't play this weekend, so we've got to talk about something else. All right, so a quick preview, 5 minutes, because apparently people want to talk about the 2 minutes of Crows news that we've got. Melbourne v the Cats, on form. You'd think the Melbourne Demons have got this wrapped up easily, but the Cats are finals hardened and very experienced, and Melbourne, this is their first rodeo for a while, so be interesting.
Well, Melbourne haven't travelled very much though either. I think they've been sitting over in Perth all the time, haven't they?
Yep.
Correct.
And so, I like Melbourne in this game. I think Melbourne will, I reckon at least 5 goals will beat Geelong by comfortably.
Nick?
I'm just thinking back to that final round game at the Cattery, and I think it might end up being something close to that again, as much as I would hate it to go that way, because I just really love Geelong to be demoralised because everybody's talking them up about, how great they're going. Although, even though I kind of don't want Melbourne grand final either, for moral reasons. It's going to be interesting with the week off, as always, is how that kind of affects. But for me, I'm thinking Melbourne just.
Yep, I'm on the Melbourne train. I think they would have to seriously implode and choke very, very hard to lose against Geelong. Optus Stadium doesn't suit Geelong at all.
Agreed.
In any case, and Melbourne are the form side.
Yep.
So I'm the D's there. Port and the Bulldogs, Mac?
Yeah, look, I hate to say it. It hurt, but I think it'll be Port, and I think they'll probably win. I'll go by the same margin, 5 goals. I think the Dogs are... They aren't the same Dogs that were really, really flying high early in the season or about mid-season. They're battling away at the moment, and they do never give in, but they battle away. But I just think, Port did it so well last time. I'm looking for weakness in their side, and I couldn't see any. And they're full of confidence. they actually believe their own shit now, unfortunately, and I think that they'll go well.
Nick?
I think Port will win.
I think the Doggies, they'll push Port, but I don't think they'll be able to beat them here on Adelaide Oval.
All right, well, I'm going against you two because the Doggies had a bit of a tail off towards the end of the season, the regular season, and I feel like they're hitting their straps. And yes, they've got a couple of little injury worries. I think Bontempelli will get up, and who knows about Waitman. But I think Port Adelaide will be guilty of doing what they so often do and believe their own hype. They've got their own concerns with Georgiadis and Fantasia. It's going to be a battle of the midfield. Both teams got some very good midfielders. Trav Boak, Robbie Gray, Ollie Wines, of course, for Port, and the younger brigade. And then we all know what the Western Bulldogs bring to the table as well. I'm tipping Western Bulldogs in a boil-over, in a heartbreaker, and it couldn't happen to a nicer team.
Oh, God, I hope you are so right, Dean. I want to be wrong. I want to be wrong.
The only thing better than Port losing this week would be Port losing in the grand final. But I don't want them to get there. But that's not just me not wanting Port to win. I honestly think the Bulldogs have just, whether they tape it a little bit or whatever, I'm not quite sure. Whether they had a bit of a training block, I'm not quite sure. But they look like they're hitting their straps. Beating Brisbane in Brisbane is no mean feat, despite Brisbane's finals record there. They're 22-2 or 28-2 or something regular season, the last couple of seasons up there. Beating Brisbane up there is no mean feat, and they did it with no preparation. They had to go up there on the morning of the game and blah, 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 all the rest of it. So, Bulldogs for mine, in a tight one.
I hope you're right.
I think the issue with the Bulldogs against Port is their defence, which is what you've highlighted, though, Fane.
Mm.
And I think that's where Port will get them.
We'll see what happens.
That's what I think.
We will see what happens. Anyway, you're what?
Her camp.
He's
you said her pants. I thought he said I'm in Nikki's pants.
No, I've got nothing to do with all this jabbing going on.
I was going to say, it's a bloody second jab for the week.
Stop it.
Sorry. All right, let's talk about the Crows. And, of course, not a huge amount of news apart from a couple of signings. We had, thank God, Nicky and Macca, Lockie Gallant re-signed for another 12 months because that was starting to make me lose the little bit of hair that I had left. I'm thinking, come on, I just want one signature, and that's the one I want.
And we got it.
But the interesting thing is, why only the 1 year? Is that doubts on our part, or is that him wanting to establish himself and then depart?
Or him establishing himself to get a better deal.
Yeah, that Nikki, that jab has filled you with knowledge. That's my take on it. I think that they've probably gone, look, we don't want to negotiate a multi-year deal on the back of one AFL game at the end of the season. Let me put a block of work together, and that puts me in a better position to negotiate my next contract, whether that be with the Crows or with somebody else. Smart move by his manager. I think that was probably why it took so long, because I reckon the Crows would have wanted to lock him up for a couple. But 1 year at least, we get to see Lockie hopefully play some more AFL football with a bit more muscle, and hopefully at the end of that we can keep him on.
And I think also what that shows is how keen we are to keep him, but he and his manager actually know the possible value of what it is. Very smart manager. As much as I would like him like you for a bit longer, and I'm pretty sure the club, I think it's incredibly smart on his point, and it sets him up to a nice, instead of being locked in at a lower value because he didn't get games till the very end of the season. If he continues on with the form next year and does that little upward trajectory that we think is going to happen, and that gives him a better deal to bank on to get a better deal.
That's my read on it, Nick. We had Big Red, Kieran, signing
Please,
on for
this one.
2 more.
I was delighted with that. There's no doubt that other clubs would have come circling after him because
Oh, 100%, Mac.
the one thing in the AFL is that if you're a ruckman, if you can half jump off the ground, you're half a chance to get on the list because they go down like flies. They really do. And teams are always looking for them. I mean, the guy that plays with Sydney, what's his name again? The ruckman. He's about his 4th club or something.
Oh, yeah.
Hickey.
Tom
Hickey. They know better out there than we do. Tom Hickey, I reckon it was about his 4th club. But, ruckman always in demand. And Drawn, I thought he was very impressive in the 2 games he played. In fact, I thought he was an improvement on how Rob had been going. So
in some ways, let's not get carried away.
No.
Okay? Let's not get carried away because Riley O'Brien didn't have the best of seasons. It's well documented that he was carrying something in the first half of the year and his form was down. I feel like after the bye, he started to work harder around the ground and make himself get to more contests around the ground. His ruck work is never going to be fantastic, but what he offers us around the ground when he's playing well is very good. Kieran's ruck work is fabulous by comparison.
It is fabulous, yeah. I really loved it.
But the big improvement for mine over the previous game that he played for us last year was he got involved more in general play. Now, if he can continue on that trajectory, then it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the ruck duo is managed. Because the other thing about Strawny is that he can kick a goal. He's played up forward a lot in the SANFL, can kick goals, and that's another string to his bow that you couldn't really say O'Brien's got, even though O'Brien's kicking's improved. So very interesting times, and it could be shaping up. I think O'Brien's last year of his contract is next year, and it just makes me wonder whether there might be an opportunity to maybe cash in on Riley.
Well, that might well be the case, Ben. Sorry, Nick.
The one thing I kind of liked early on for Nick's is when he was selecting the team, we could actually see that he would actually select the team. He'd make a couple of changes to match up against our opponents sometimes. He kind of went away from that a little bit this year. But for my mind, when you've got Strawn and Rob, because we know who Rob struggles against as an opponent, and if you've got Strawn playing well, I think that's, and to keep the pair of them actually competing quite well against each other is like, well, you're actually out of this game because you actually don't match up that well, but he matches up better and it gives us a better look for our midfield, etc. And I actually think that is a great thing to have.
Yeah, Ned in the chat has made himself useful and just reminded us that Rob signed for 4 years this year, so he's around for a while.
No, that's true. But people often ask about signed players, whether you want to trade him or not.
Oh, absolutely. It means nothing in the grand scheme of things. And I think having Kieran on for 2 is good insurance. It gives us 2 quality rucks. We've also got Himmelberg, assuming he hangs around, that can pinch hit. And even Frampton in a break glass situation. Now, just remember, ladies and gentlemen in the chat, if you want to have something to say and get involved, stick your hand up. Now's a good time to get amongst it. The other signing, of course, that we had was Matt Crouch, reportedly for 2 on a reduced salary. Thoughts?
Meh.
Oh.
Meh.
And I just went a little bit dark because one of my studio lights just blew and scared the absolute bejesus out of me.
Right.
So now I've got a nice little shadowy effect, whereas on this side of my face. So it's not an attempt to black out my face. It's actually my light just blew up.
It might pretty you up a bit, please.
Thanks, Mac. Says the person who doesn't even put his face on. Come on, mate. You're better than that. Get on with it. What are you going to say?
Matt Crouch. I was actually pleased with the signing of Matt and for a 2-year stint. If we let Matt go into a trade, well, obviously he didn't do that well when looking around either. When you miss a whole season like he did, you can't command the top salary that you can if you just played the last 23 games and done it well. And I thought to sign him up for 2 years, he'll be looking for. He's not getting big money. He'll be looking for big money in 2 years' time, and he'll be in an unrestricted free agent. And that'll be a perfect time for us to let him go when he's built up his form and we get a definite first rounder for him. And
you'll never get a first rounder for Matt Crouch.
Nah.
You'll never get a first rounder for Matt Crouch.
We couldn't get it for Brad. We're not going to get it for him.
Well,
and here's the other thing, Macca. The only way you get a first rounder for Matt Crouch is if he plays 42 games over the next 2 seasons. And if he's playing 42 games over the next 2 seasons, guess who's not? Luke Pedler.
Well,
or Sam Berry.
I was going to ask you about all that. How the hell are we going to work all that? Because Matt Crouch is our biggest problem is the lightness of type in the sense of Matt Crouch. Lairdy, Keys, they're all in there scrambling hard at getting the ball, and then not great disposal after that. With what we really do need is, and I'm hoping that's what we're going to draft, is that speedy midfielder, and then that forces a situation where we don't use that Sloan Keys Laird combination all the time, which is just not quick enough. Having said that, I still think the way you're talking about Crouch is if he can't play football. He can play.
Yeah, that's not the point.
Yeah, but we don't need him. He is exactly the wrong player that we need. This is when you get rid of him, because it means less time for Pedler, less time for Schoenberg, less time for players who actually have that speed to come out, because we've seen what's been picked this year, and it is the Keys, Sloan, Laird, consistently in the midfield. 3 frickin' slow players. Matt Crouch is another frickin' slow player with poor disposal. I prefer Keys, and I prefer Laird's disposal than I do over Matt Crouch.
What happens if Reid pulls a rabbit out of his hat and we get Dawson in? Where's he going to play?
Well, Dawson. Well, maybe he doesn't play then. But
maybe who doesn't play? Yeah.
No, Dawson.
Let's ask 1990 Crow. How are you, mate?
Good, Phoenix. How are you going? Haven't spoken to you in a few weeks.
No, that's right. We've missed you, mate. Greatly.
I've been busy with work, but nice to call in tonight.
I don't want to hear excuses. I just want to hear your points.
This is definitely the crux of my thoughts in the last week is this Matt Crouch signing. When it happened, I was actually quite surprised when it was announced. I thought, over the last 2 weeks, all the tea leaves were pointing towards him leaving and us trying to get a band 3 compensation out of him, but that didn't happen. So it was interesting to see that news a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
The interesting thing I think is if Crouch is signing, it means we have every intention of him attending majority of the centre bounce attendances, because that's the only role he can play. And then what does that actually do with our remaining midfielders, which you look at Rory Laird, he's probably first pick midfielder. And then Ben Keys and Rory Sloan, and obviously the next rung, which would be Harry Schoenberg, and whoever else will be running through there. So my thoughts are that if we're signing Crouch, we have to play him, because we've obviously allocated a decent amount of salary cap towards him.
Disagree with that, because the reports are that we haven't allocated a decent amount of salary cap to him. That he actually. That. Oh, I would. I
don't think so.
Because I think what actually broke this down is the fact, by all reports, and I don't have any reason not to believe them, there wasn't a lot of interest. And why would any club be interested in Matt Crouch after a year off with groins, at 26 years of age, coming off the back of a pretty average season the year before? No, I wouldn't be surprised if he's sitting on about 400k.
I think you're probably on the lower end of what I would be thinking he'd be on. I think he would have gone for somewhere 450 to 500, but we're not talking mega dollars either way. So I still think if Matt Crouch is available, Matthew Nix has shown that he will pick the most experienced team he has available to him. So I think he will play, and I think that'll have a effect on the rest of the midfield that's getting picked. So obviously Crouch, Laird, Keys, and Sloan are all going to be picked. And now how does that actually affect the development of Pedler, Schoenberg, Berry, plus whoever we pick up in the draft this year? So because really, if we're trying to compete in the next 3 or 4 years, it has to be that second wave of young midfielders that drags us to that competition level. So I'm really concerned about how do we actually go about this, and it needs to be a more even spread of centre clearances and general midfield minutes over the whole group. I don't think I necessarily have a problem with having an additional midfielder in there that is AFL standard, because you could see from the sides that we were putting out there that we were definitely missing 3 or 4 players that were adequate to be at that level. Now, if we get someone like Jordan Dawson, and we bring in Wayne Miller back from injury, and if we go and get someone else like, I don't know, Rankin, we start to look at the best 22, and all of a sudden it's way more competitive than it was this season. So my thoughts are that our signing of Matt Crouch is a very interesting proposition, because if we bring another couple of players from interstate and add in our players that were injured this year, plus Matt Crouch, all of a sudden we've got a side that on paper will be better than this season. And how does that affect our rebuild and Matthew Nix's his decision making and how we move forward?
Well, it's a beautifully put proposition, 1990, and I think that's where Thien was going to, that in the fact that it will affect our rebuild and it will affect certain players. And so there's no doubt that is right. I think Nixie's no different than any other coach. They all like to win, and they like to put out the players that they think will win. But I still think that Pedler's good enough to work his way into the side, and as will Cook and Berry. I still think they'll work their way into the team.
How though?
Well,
yeah, they
Where
won't
are they going to
because-
play, Mac? It's all very well good to say that.
Injuries.
Well,
and that should not be happening. We need to play those younger players in the guts. That's what needs to happen. I was very angry when I actually saw the news that we re-signed Crouch. I think this is a massive step backwards for our development, because that is our one major area of failure we have, is our midfield. The way we set it up with those continual slow players, we have players on our list that actually give us more speed and give us better quality disposal out of there, and yet we consistently go back to the well of these slow inside mids that just hat kick or handball out the back. I wanted to get rid of Matt Crouch, and I think what this shows is that nobody else wanted him, and we've gone and done the whole, okay, you couldn't get a better deal elsewhere, we couldn't get something for you, so we'll sign you on again, but it is going to have to be at less. No, we needed to be ruthless. We were a little bit ruthless with Lynch and Talia, etc., but only a little bit, because I think that the writing there was on the wall, definitely, and they needed to be moved on. But we needed to get rid of Crouch. He is a liability in our midfield.
Nick, I think the problem, I agree with everything that you said except for one thing. I think the problem was that in the end, I mean, let's not forget that Crouchy was a free agent. You can't delist him, because any value that is contained in his contract obviously disappears when he disappears off the list. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place, because if we can't get decent return from him in the market, then he's better off on our list than not on our list. if the reports are true and he's on, a sub 500 contract, I'm okay with that. My problem is, as Macca rightly points out, Nix has shown a propensity to play our most experienced midfield, and Matt Crouch fit will be part of that. So I've like you, Nick, I've seen a lot to like out of our young midfielders, Harry obviously in particular, but even the short little bursts we've seen of Braden Cook and
Barry earlier in the year,
and Berry when he was actually played in position instead of hidden up forward, and even blokes like Ned for that matter. That's what we want to see through the midfield, and those lads need 50 games, not caught in a forward pocket or a half forward flank, but in the position where we want them to play. So I'm a bit worried about all these second string mid-size players that we have floating through the midfield and floating across half back and floating in on the flanks up forward, Macca. A lot of these blokes that we've got are clogging up space, and I'm just a bit concerned that keeping someone like Matt in the first 22 rotation is going to make a couple of the younger lads go, well, maybe my time isn't best spent at the Adelaide Football Club.
Well, they have signed on for the next couple of years anyhow.
Yeah, but that's now. That I'm talking about next time round.
Well,
when they've played half the games.
I think if you're good enough, you do.
Come on, Macca. That is old school thinking. It's old school thinking.
It's not old school, because let me talk about two other players. You're talking about Crouch, but there are two other players I think are our problem players, and somebody put one name up there in the chat, and it's Sloan. Now, Sloan is one of our major problems. I talk about Crouch. Sloan is a problem, and he's got to either be a half forward flanker, and I can't see a spot from there, or he's got to be on a half back flank. That's what I think.
Slowing in for Murphy, that's the obvious upgrade.
Well, I'd be happy to go along that path, but Cook's got to be playing, in my opinion. I think Cook is going to be one of our major talents. I can see a touch of class in that lad. I just thought he had the attributes I really like to see.
So anyway, you've got Sloan out of the midfield, so that makes way for Matt Crouch.
Well, for me. My starting midfield would always include Schoenfeld as well.
Schoenberg,
but that won't happen. Sorry. That won't happen. We've seen that. He was playing well this year, but they still didn't bloody start him in there.
No, this is the way
they started him on the bench.
But I think that he did talk very, very highly of him after the end of the year. And he was talking about that he will have more mid-time minutes coming up next season, and I think he will. I have no doubt he will have a lot more.
There's no evidence to suggest that's the case, Macca, and plenty of evidence to say otherwise. Don't forget, this is a club that's stuck around with Scotty Thompson for 100 years. We've sunk 230 games into David McKay, for God's sakes. This is not a team that moves on its favourite sons lightly, and you could say we did it with Lynchy and we did it with Talia, absolutely, but Rory Sloan is a different kettle of fish, and you tell Sloan he can't play midfield.
We just had a whole celebration round in round 23 of all our oldies getting a nice little win together. It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
but you talk about that. Actually, that Thompson one was even worse that extra year, because we traded Lyons out so that Thompson could still be there.
Exactly right.
That was a really bad one. That one.
That's what I fear again. Jared Lyons is exactly the profile that we have currently with Schoenberg and Sam Berry.
Well, my two problem players are, and I understand exactly what you're saying, Finn, and I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but Taylor Walker, is he going to play again next year? I mean, if he plays...
No, I don't want to talk about Taylor Walker. I want to talk about the midfield. We'll talk about Taylor Walker. You haven't solved the problem of the midfield. You reckon if you're good enough, you'll get picked. that's a load of rubbish. Because we've seen players that are good enough and more dynamic and younger and fitter and faster and all the rest of it not play in the midfield this year.
And Sloane's got to go out of the midfield.
Yeah, well, that just makes room for Matt Crouch. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't solve the problem.
What happens if Jackson Haitley has a big preseason and he's gotten rid of his groin injury and he's tearing it up in trial games? Does he get a game?
He won't tear it up in trial games. He's
don't
not that
know
level. He's not that level.
The problem is that we've got a lot of... We have to settle on a new generation of midfield. And I don't mind having a couple of old blokes running through there, but that has to be the second role. That's a secondary role for them. You know, Rory Sloane should be playing off half-forward flank. I agree 100% with the swap with Murphy. Sloane can take a ball overhead, he can kick a goal. So far more value Sloane as a forward option. But at the moment, we remember how we used to say you can't have both Crouches playing in the midfield at the same time. Well, yes, I don't think you can have Rory Laird and Matt Crouch playing in the same midfield. So what the hell are you going to do? You're not going to drop Lairdy, obviously. So you're going to have two workmen in Crouch and Laird in the mids, and Benny Keys running through there, who is all bullocking and all the rest of it, all energy but no silk, with a bit of Harry Schoenberg. And where does Luke Pedler get a run? Where does Sam Berry get a run? Where do these kids get a run?
Where does our four get a run?
Exactly.
Look, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I don't know the answers to it.
Well, then don't say if they're good enough they'll get a run, because you know that's not true.
Well,
that's just a fob off. That's just a throwaway line macker. There's nothing behind it. And I'm not trying to have a go at you personally. What I'm trying to highlight is that a lot of people say things like that, but there's not a shred of truth in it. There's so much evidence of good players that don't get opportunities, that move to other clubs and get opportunities. Jared Lyons, classic example.
Many years, and well, Ben Keys, yes, but there's also many opportunities of list cloggers being kept as well. So, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about young lads and whether they get the chance to prove that they are good players. I think the two lads that you quoted somehow have to be in the team feed. I do agree with that, and I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know what the coach has in mind. I don't know how he intends to set it up, and it means there isn't an extra talent that's available. But whether he's going to play them all at the same time, I don't know.
Yeah,
as I said, if I was coach,
Nick's is also on rec. Sorry, go on, mate.
I was going to say, if I was coach, I'd have two very experienced players in there, but I'd always have Harry Schoenberg coming in there in one rotation, and one of the other lads, younger lads, coming in another rotation. Then there might be three rotations rather than two rotations. I don't know, because there's four on the bench as well, which you can also run through as well.
It just feels like we've gone back to 2018 when we valued possessions over actual impact.
I agree.
I guess all this is a bit hypothetical, because maybe Matt has been told that he's got to break his way back into the side, and maybe all we're doing is showing other clubs that he can get through a season and that his groins are all right, even if he does play half of it in the twos, just to get a little bit more interest and value out of him at the back end of his second year. I'm not sure, but I think the club was just caught out because they lowballed him with a 2-year deal, expecting that there'd be interest somewhere else, and the fact that there hasn't been somewhere else has made the club make a choice between delisting him, which really isn't an option, or retaining him on the list. And I think it's actually caused a problem. I don't think it would have been a signature that JR would have been happy to take.
That's 2 years in a row. The Crouch is basically management strategy.
Well,
Yeah.
the other thing too, talking about list management, I was going to say that that's another spot that's taken out. And when we look at, and I'm not sure of how many players we do have to get rid of, because normally you have 44 players on your list. We had 46, and that's because we had the 2 category B players. Do the category B players? Do they say stay as a Cat B rookie forever until we upgrade them? Or
I'm not sure, Macca, but I don't want to talk about that this week.
Maximum 3 weeks, 3 years, sorry.
Oh, okay.
That's just a rookie. That's just rookies. Maximum 3 years. That's not specifically category B rookies.
Yeah, but I think it may apply, but that's going to determine who is going to go and who's going to stay out of who's left, though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, 100%. But that's another conversation. I don't want to delve into that just yet. 1990, good to have you on once again. We have another caller waiting, so I'll flick you back to the audience, mate.
Yeah, well done, 1990. Always a thinker, mate. Well done.
Did you have one more? And we've got Arab Child. Come in, mate, when you're ready. Look, it's just a conundrum, Mac, isn't it? I'm not quite sure what they're going to do about it. Anyway, Arab Child, how you going, mate? No, muted by the sounds of it. No, not working. Flick you back to the audience, and if you can get that solved, mate, you can come back on. Yeah, look, it's an interesting situation, Macca, because we've got the other thing with Matt Crouch is he's probably one of the few players that we've got who is in the right age profile. You know, we've talked before about having a very severe dip between 24 and 27 on our list. Matty at 26, pardon me, with good games under his belt. He's a, ex-club champion, etc., etc. You know, if we could get 2016 Matt Crouch back or 2017 Matt Crouch back, that would be better, because that was the year that Matty Crouch was a bit more penetrating with his kick, a little bit more dynamic and a bit more proactive. But
wasn't it 2017 he won the BNF?
Yeah, I think so, 16 or 17.
17.
But those groins are a worry. So Arab's, I think, got it sorted out. Let's see if we can get him back on. Come back in, mate. We'll try again. How you going? Nope. Not happening for whatever reason, mate. We can't hear you, unfortunately. Back out. So we've got a few left. Obviously, Jake Kelly is still yet to sign. We've got Paddy Parnell. We've got, who else have we got?
Parnell signed, Fee?
I don't think so. Who else is there?
There's
O'Connor.
And the guy's been on there for 5 years.
Davis.
Yeah. There's one more.
And that's about it. That's about it.
Yeah. Well, you'd expect that Davis and O'Connor will be two that will definitely go. I can't see Parnell getting.
They'll be gone.
Yeah.
Newchurch and Borlays are rookies, 1990. 1990 listed Newchurch and Borlays, but they're rookies.
But they're Cat B rookies. Do they stay as Cat B rookies, or do they become normal rookies? And that's what I'm saying. Because if they
isn't Cat B being ruled out? Isn't that going?
No.
Aren't we just having rookies now, and you can have up to 6 rookies?
God, all I've been, I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, that's why I don't want to have that conversation tonight, because I'm not researched on it just yet. 1990 saying they need to be re-signed as Cat B. So we'll talk about this when we do our draft and trades.
And that will affect you very heavily. in that conversation, because that will determine what the number of players that have to be delisted to meet the requirements.
Yeah. But the boys saying on chat, Mackesy, there's been a little bit more talk about Mackesy being homesick again. Obviously had his struggles at the beginning of the season, and after the year that we've had with COVID, etc., once again, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to see Fisher maybe request a move back home. But again, he's not going to attract the sort of value that's going to repay us for pick 6.
We get a bag of fish and chips for him. He's not going to attract anything.
Not really, no. He'll probably get a third rounder on potential.
That would be the best.
So there's a bit to play out, and of course, Nix is on record as saying we want to recruit speed and class into the side. So there's a bit to play out with this trade period. The re-signings, by and large, are good. Matty Crouch, we've gone over. Problematic, I think. But I'd love to get Dawson or Stevens through the door, but I actually think we'll end up very close to the same list that we've got now. What do you guys think?
Well, there's 4 names that I keep saying as potential trade targets for Adelaide this year, and I'm a bit your way fan. I don't think any of them will probably happen. Dawson, I mean, he would be the cream. There's no doubt about that. If we could get him, I rate him very, very highly. He's an excellent player, and he would add a little bit of magic to our side. There's no doubt about that. He's a good player.
Vardy says Hopper. That won't happen. He's not the right type. Vardy in the chat says Hopper. That won't happen, and I don't actually think, as great a player as Hopper is, I don't think he's the right fit for us.
Well, I like Hopper. I was watching him very, very closely, Fink, so I thought you would probably say that about him. But he is very good at getting himself on his own as well. He's a two-way player. He can go very hard for the ball, but he's also got the capacity to make space as well. I like him better than our midfielders.
I like him too.
Yeah, for that reason. So, getting him would be very, very hard, I think.
Ned, I don't know whether that's true that Hopper's signed last week. You could be right, Ned, but the last thing I read, which was later in the week, he was still unsigned. Anyway, let's continue.
Well, okay. The other 2 they talk about are Stevens and Rankin. Now, Stevens has never done anything of particular note for Sydney, and he can't hold his spot in Sydney. And he's been given several opportunities during the year to if he played well enough, to nab himself a spot in a very good side. I don't know what the excitement is about Stevens. Is he homesick, or what will make him better here than what we've seen him play in Sydney? I don't know.
Fair midfield he's trying to break into over there.
Yeah, but they should be also rebuilding their midfield. If you want to talk about an old midfield, theirs is very old.
But they're not, Macca. This is the thing. Whether they should be, this is where sometimes you talk in hypotheticals and they're not real. Stevens has had a lot of trouble breaking into that midfield because they're not turning over that midfield.
Well, obviously they're not. That's the point I'm making.
No, you said they should be. They're not, and that's why he hasn't been able to break into that side.
If he was good enough, he would force him to pick him.
Rubbish. They're not going to drop Luke Parker or one of those blokes.
Well, I still think if a player plays good enough, he gets a game. But
that's 1970s talk, mate.
No,
it doesn't work that way these days. When a team thinks that they're in the premiership window, they will stick with the players that got them there. We've seen it with us. We've seen it with Richmond. We've seen it with Geelong. We're seeing it with Sydney. That when everyone thought Sydney were rebuilding, they caught everyone off guard at the beginning of the year because they were winning games. And it took people 3 or 4 games to realise, hang on a minute, they're not actually rebuilding. They've still got the core of the side that they've had for the last 5 years.
Now, the one that is a possibility, but it depends what we were prepared to pay. And thanks very much, Vardy Magic, for that. in my prime in 76. Thanks a lot. That's your fault, Pete.
Well, I didn't say anything. I never said you're in your prime at all.
Personal abuse. Personal abuse.
Do I get a jab too now?
Not from me, you won't.
I thought a left jab to the jaw.
Oh, well, that might be possible.
Yeah.
But, moving on, I was going to say with Rankin, I don't get Rankin because his first game of footy, he looked bloody brilliant. Right in his very first game that he played.
Yeah, but we've been through this, Mac.
It is. You got to wonder whether the guy's tanking, but he looked so disinterested. And
we've been through this,
and he plays at a lower level. Yeah, but does that mean Gold Coast would be prepared to trade him? That's what I'm getting at.
That means that we want him.
Well, if that's the best that he can offer, I don't want him. That's the point I'm making.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, I think you've got to take a bloke's form and face value, and you look at a bloke like Stevens. Yes, he hasn't been able to make it into the first for Sydney, but he's been absolutely destroying it in the twos. Whereas Rankin, who's a top pick in his draft year, after a promising first couple of games, as you say, has really been very consistent for that side. At least Stevens, if we're not comparing apples and apples in terms of the type of player, but in terms of who you want to bring in, I'd rather bring in someone like Stevens who's been banging the door down and not getting a game than someone like Rankin who's been given games on potential and hasn't performed.
If you were, let's just say, for example, that Gold Coast were prepared to trade Rankin, what would you be prepared to give to get Rankin?
Second round pick.
Yeah, I'd do that. I would do that because I really don't think the guy likes being there. I just don't really think it because it doesn't look like his heart and soul's in his footy.
Well, and there was always queries about his attitude. There was talk at Westies and all the rest of it. I mean, he's obviously gifted. 100%, no doubt about it, no question about it. He's gifted, right? But that doesn't mean a thing. So, there's been tons of gifted players. You talk about gifted players. The name McAdam comes to mind, and I'm not just talking about Shane. I'm talking about just about every McAdam that's ever walked onto a football field. Incredibly gifted, but it's touch and go. It's touch and go whether you're going to get full toed odds out of them. Rankin's a bit the same.
Well, do you think we'll actually get anybody? I don't think we'll get anybody. I think next year will be probably the year. Look, I do believe that we would do something to get Dawson, and we may for Stevens. But in the end, I think we generally always end up with nothing.
Nick, I don't know about you. I think we'll go pretty hard for Stevens. He's the one that's gettable, in my opinion. I'd love them to have a crack at Dawson because I think he's quality. But I think, and there's reports that Sydney is struggling a bit with their cap, etc., etc. So Dawson, I think, for the right price is probably on the table. I just don't know whether we've got the price that Sydney would be asking for. I don't think we are willing to give away our first round pick. And the world's pretty bare after that.
I think didn't Nick say that everything was tradable except pick 4?
Yeah, that's right. They're not giving that up.
Yeah, no. But I think there's a chance we can get at least one of those out of Dawson's or Stevens. And as you said, they're actually showing some really nice quality in the twos, and they're exactly what we need. And they've experienced the AFL system. They're not a newbie coming in, which is going to take 2 years, like Gallant, a little skinny one. But they're ones that we can see that this is where we really need some assistance.
What are you saying, Nick?
I think we've got to play hard and try and get it, but it's going to be difficult because we're not going to give up that 4. And
1990 put up this proposition.
Yeah.
Pick 4 for Dawson, Stevens, and their pick 12.
No, they won't do that.
They would do it.
But
you're going to give 2 players and a first round pick for pick 4. Are you kidding me?
Not many people pass up pick 4 though, I think.
They're giving up a quality midfielder, a budding young midfielder, and a first round pick for 1 player in an even draft. Nah, they'd never do that.
Okay, but I thought what I said was 1990 put it up, and I said I'd do that. But you're saying Sydney wouldn't do it. I'm saying that's fair enough.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do it. I'd be happy to do it.
Yeah. And that's the thing with a lot of these ideas, these PlayStation, those kind of trades. We're saying, would you do it? It was like, yeah, we would. But you also have to actively think, is the other club going to do it? And most of the time, the answer is a flat out no.
No. And these days, with picks being worth points, it makes it a bit more problematic just to chuck picks around like that. I can't really. I mean, I think there's not as much value in pick 4 as what some people think. I still wonder whether they're going to split that pick and trade down for maybe a second first rounder to try and get a couple of targets in the draft.
And I know what Nixie said, but I agree with you, Fane. I would admit I'd be surprised if they didn't do it, to be honest. If they're talking about getting other players into the club, they may have to well do that.
Well, that's all well and good, but you've got to have. We don't have the currency right now. And that's why I said to you the other day that the bloke that I think has got some trade currency is Chase Jones. Chase Jones has had a good, particularly back half of the season. He's shown something. I think he's shown enough where other teams would think there's some potential and something to work with there. And I think him with a pick gets you into the conversation. But we don't have too much else, Macca, that gets us into the conversation. Maybe Riley O'Brien, but I don't think so.
No, I agree with you. I don't. We don't have those tradable players that a lot of clubs have got. Our 3 very good players, they're retiring, and after that, then you go back to if you're going to trade players that have got currency, you're probably talking about like Smith and Seedsman, and they'd have some currency, but we want to keep them as well.
Well, I don't see the point in keeping Smith. There's no. We had this conversation last week. There's no point in keeping Smith.
Well, if he brought the right player in, I'd be happy to trade him.
I mean, what's the point in keeping Brody? Is he going to be around for our next premiership? Have we got 960 halfback flankers on the list at the moment? Is he young enough to? Is he young enough and playing well enough to still attract some sort of attention? Absolutely.
Oh no, he'd have good currency. I would trade him if it means getting. If you look at our list, there are various areas that we obviously need. We don't need anything really in defence. I think we've got a lot of up and coming youngsters in terms of half forwards and midfielders, etc. But a classy one would be very, very nice to have on top of that, and and up forward. So that's the area you're looking at. You look at what your needs are, and so from that point of view, Smith would be tradable if it were for the right area that we can bring into the club.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's those sort of players that you got to put with pick 4 to get into the conversation. Unfortunately, I'd see us trying to do a few trades. I don't see us getting anything. The other player of note would be the lad who can't break into the Bulldogs team at the moment. What's his name again? Oh, I always forget his name. Someone, Lipinski. Thank you, 1990.
Oh, Lipinski,
Lipinski would be worth a look.
Definitely worth a look.
But again, but we might have some luck trading for Lipinski because he wouldn't. I don't think he'd command a first round pick, and I think the Bulldogs might be interested in someone like Fisher McCasey, and we could get that done for McAsey plus our first second rounder.
What? We give McAsey and a second rounder for Lipinski?
Yep.
And he can't make their side?
Well, he's played a hell of a lot more games than McAsey.
I wouldn't do that, Fee. I wouldn't do that.
Well, unfortunately, this is the what you've just said then, and what people are saying in the chat is exactly why Adelaide can't attract players. Because if you want to attract a Victorian kid to South Australia, you've got to be prepared to pay overs. It's as simple as that. And you can't have it both ways. And I've gone on and on about this on this cast, that our strategy for drafting and trading is all for trading and paying is all wrong. All wrong. You cannot attract players if you've got the flat structure of salary that we have. And if you are not willing to pay overs to get a ladder across.
Yeah, but I don't think, as I understand it, I think I read an article that said that Adelaide have got building up a reserve of about $2.5 million in terms of
that lot of good that does us.
Yeah, but it might not be this year that it gets used, Flynn. It might be next year when somebody like
but you just said you wouldn't. You just said you wouldn't do the trade that I outlined to get Lipinski.
No, I wouldn't,
because everyone thinks about what a player's worth. The simple fact of the matter is, if you target a player and you identify a player that you want, you pay whatever you need to pay to get him. It's as simple as that. And when you're in Adelaide, we are not dealing the same way that a Victorian club has to deal when it comes to the draft, because
you're right. I agree with that.
So you have to be prepared to pay over market value to get the player that you want. It's as simple as that.
Yes, I agree with you, but I would only overpay for the right player. It's got to be a good player. Lipinski is not that level player that I would do it for.
He's only been out of favour in the second half of the season.
I know. I would for Lukosius. Yes, definitely for Lukosius.
Why would you do it for Lukosius?
Because I think he is a good player. He's playing in a shit team, and he plays very well. And
what he is a failed forward who's now playing fast and loose across half back.
Well, I think he's versatile and he can play both ends of the ground, and he's got a lovely kick on him, which makes him stand out on our side if he was playing with it.
Those Paul Seedsman.
Yes, but I'm talking about actually finding a teammate. I'm talking about finding a teammate. I do look. I really rate Lukosius, and I would be prepared to pay over for him. But Lipinski
where are you going to play him?
Well, you could play him up forward. You could play him in bound back. You could play him.
He's failed up forward.
In their team, he has, yes.
And they've got better midfield than we do.
Come on, Macca.
Well, look, I'm sorry I have an opinion.
No, you're entitled to have an opinion, but he's not a forward. He's been proven to be a tweener. He's not the right size for a forward. What he's turned out to be is a very good running halfback who can direct play. And yes, he's a classy player. Yes, he's got great disposal. But in our side, with our absolute abundance of players on that line, why the hell would you pay anything for Jack?
Well, do you think out of he and Lipinski, who is a better player?
It's got nothing to do with who's the better player. It's about who's the better player in the position that we need.
And where are you going to play Lipinski?
In the midfield rotation.
Right. What then? look, I wouldn't mind getting him, but not for the price that you were talking about, Fiend. Because I just don't think he's worth that.
And yet you pay overs for Lukosius to get him in just because you can.
He's a very versatile player, and he could play any particular line you want to play him on.
Well, no, that's actually 100% wrong. Because Gold Coast have proven that the only place that you can play him is across half back.
Well, 90 agrees with it, and look, I'm not going to argue any further because of the point that I'm never going to win with you on this particular argument. That's the first point. And secondly, it doesn't have to be Lukosius, but I'd rather have Dawson if I could have Dawson. But what I'm saying is we're obviously building up a war chest of money for somebody. And I do know the Crows actually love Lukosius. They've always loved him. So that's why I just wondered whether it is Lukosius. But it may be totally other players. And look, but whoever we get must make our side better by being a star in the position that we don't have one. And that's got to be the key. Forget names. I don't think like Lipinski is going to be the answer to making us the team that we want to be. He'd be good there as an extra, but he's not that one where the war chest is going to go to. That's what I think, anyhow.
Nick?
For me, it's the midfield, and it's always got to be the midfield. I'm like you, Fiend. I think for the price we would have to pay to get Lukosius, it's not worth it. I don't think, and I think for a lot of people, they are still blinded by the fact that he was a good SA player. It's to get the SA player back. I think that colours a lot of people's opinions on him. And you're right that he's the running half back. He's a tall running half back. And how many running half backs do we already have on this side? Unless we get rid of some of them, we don't need to bring another one in.
Well, nominate who you're going to get, Nick.
We've already talked about them.
Yeah, I think it's the ones who are already we're looking at, rumours-wise, in terms of Dawson or Stevens. Just trying to see if we can extract them out, one of them.
Well, to me, the ones that I'd like to extract are either Dawson or Hopper. And, maybe Hopper's gone and maybe he doesn't want to come and maybe he's re-signed, all those things. But if he was available, he'd be one I'd love to get. 99 said he won't come, and that's probably right. But I'm just saying, who would you like? And
there's a whole lot of players I'd like. I'd love Bontempelli, but that's not going to happen.
I'm talking about when they're out of contract, Nicky.
They don't have to be out of. They don't have to be out of contract, you know.
No, they don't.
But it's a lot easier when they are.
Yeah, but they don't have to be out of contract. And a lot of the media speculation is focused around blokes that haven't signed on yet. But some of the biggest trades that occurred last year were for contracted players. Delors, Stevenson.
Yeah.
They don't have to be out of contract.
Yeah, and that has actually changed the past couple of years. So it's hard to tell, and because I steer away from a lot of discussion posts and what's happening, so I don't really have a lot of knowledge what's going on in that space at the moment. But I just kind of seen a couple of those names that have been linked towards us and some conversations, and I think they're gettable, but they've got to be gettable at the right price.
Well, that was my point, Nick.
And
So-
to me, Lukosius or Rankin won't be gettable at the right price from Gold Coast. Not at all.
And if that's the case, you don't get it. But if once you start chasing Victorians and Sydney players, yeah, I do agree with Fiend, you've got to pay overs, but it's got to be the right player. And Dawson isn't a player I pay overs for, but Lipinski I wouldn't.
Well, it depends what you think overs is. I mean, I think anything would do for a bloke like Hopper or Dawson. I'd blow our first round for either of those two players because I don't actually think there's enough quality at the top end of the draft to justify not paying a top end draft pick for a bloke of that caliber.
No, I agree.
Really, Jason Horn was the only one that was worth it there, and the rest is a bit of a crapshoot.
Yeah, and look, there will be good players there, Glenn, but like you said, it is a bit of a crapshoot after that. Horn was a standout. If you got him, well, you'd give up your pick for him in an apartment, but you can't get him, of course. But after that, there's nobody who's nearly a Jason Horn, not on paper anyhow. But then, the other players will emerge that turn out to be very, very good. But
100%. Like, from the South Australian crop, we've still got Matty Roberts, we've still got Arlo Draper. There's a couple of others that are going to bob up. We've got Isaiah Dudley, who's an NGA prospect who could end up being that good small forward that we're looking for. There's a couple of others, so there's going to be players worthwhile picking up. But if we're talking about cream, top-end talent, silk through the midfield, all the rest of it, is this the year to be looking for a player like that? I actually think this is the year that it is when we've got an emerging midfield. But unfortunately, our midfield isn't emerging because we've got Sloan and now Matt Crouch. And Keys and Laird in the midfield. So maybe it's next year.
And it may well be next year. But they are building up. And when you think about it, with the players the senior players that have already been told they're not getting a contract next year, they would have been on very good money, those three players. And when you add up their total, there's a lot of money there. We're no longer paying Jenkins. We're no longer paying Betts' salary. We're only going to be playing our own players. And
I think are we still paying Stengel?
I thought there was an agreed payout with Stengel.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know he's still on our list, but I wasn't sure whether we were paying him or not.
I saw an article that said that we'd come to an agreed amount with him, and he was delisted.
Okay, maybe he's just on our list until 30 October or whenever it is. I don't know.
Yes, and then he drops off.
Okay. Yep. So anyway, lots to play out. So much for our 1 hour podcast, ladies and gentlemen. But it was an interesting discussion, well worth having. We've got 5 minutes left, so just a couple of people to come on. Animal can come on. How you going, mate? You're there? How you going, mate?
Hey, how are you?
Good. Just a quick one, mate.
Yeah, no, I'll just be quick. I just had a little idea. Just one little side note, though. Just on Macca's defence, what about Luco in the Lynch role? Like, how do you, like Lukosius doing?
Well, my thoughts, 2 points on that. Is the Lynch role still relevant? And secondly, we've got blokes that can play that role already. Where are you going to play Braden Cook?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It was just an idea. But anyway, the thing I was thinking of, I know it's just a bit of a crazy trade idea, right? What about a 3-way trade between us and North and GWS? So North gets pick 2 from GWS and O'Brien, and maybe Jones or something like you said, and then GWS gets our pick 4 and maybe Nixie's first, something like that, and we get pick 1, because then North still gets the kid from Victoria. That's everyone's raging about.
Ben Callahan.
Obviously, we know. Yeah. GWS can use 4 to really look around the country because they're not really thinking about local as much as we are. And then they get a pretty good pick next year, probably in the top 10, no doubt.
I just can't see North giving away a gilt-edged midfielder.
Do you reckon they need a ruckman though?
Well, yeah, but how important is a ruckman compared to a gilt-edged midfielder? Are you gonna drop 3 places?
Callahan's pretty good.
Yeah, but are you gonna drop 3 places?
Well, they're dropping 1 place.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't see them doing it.
You're probably right, but I just thought.
What do you reckon, Mac?
Look, I think if you could pull it off, it would be a very good deal, but I don't think it'll happen, Rabbit. That's the only problem, mate. I think the principle of what you said is excellent. If it worked out like that, I'd be all for it. But I think North Melbourne would be very heavily criticised if they passed their pick one on, I think. And so I think they're just going to stick to it like glue.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I think,
mate.
it's so hard, pick one is just so valuable because if you get that wrong, then you really are no good at selecting. And in this case,
it's almost a pity. Like I like what we got last year in Riley O'Brien, but not Riley O'Brien, sorry.
Thilthorpe.
And the number one, yeah, Thilthorpe, sorry.
Yeah,
but it's almost a pity. There was a couple of kids that could have went in that pick one spot, and unlike this year, there's like a really clear. Well, of who's available, there's like a really clear number one.
Yeah,
and it's almost a pity we didn't land on one of those years. Even like a couple of years ago when it was Sam Walsh, or there's been some pretty good number ones out there, but we've kind of come in on a year where it's could have been anyone really.
I think that if we had any chance to actually pull off a trade with North Melbourne and get the bad pick one off them, we blew that. In the last game of the year.
Well, that's kind of what I thought about the 3-way trade, because with GWS, pick 2, I'm sure they'll take Callahan, but there's some really good kids in WA and that they might want to look at. There's a bunch of kids around the country they could look at with force.
So why would GWS bother getting us involved?
It's a good point. Yeah, why would they?
Why wouldn't they just give pick 2 and a player to North? Why wouldn't they just give pick 2 and their second pick to North for pick 1, or pick 2 and a player to North for pick 1? They don't need to get us involved in that situation.
No, you're right. Yeah.
But I like where you're thinking, and it's not bad for a drummer. I got to say, I had to slip that one in. Sorry, mate.
My favourite Muppet.
All right, mate. Thanks very much. I'll chuck you back in. Thanks for your support.
I'll catch you, Robert.
All right. Well, I think we might have probably done that to death for now, but there's going to be obviously lots to talk about over the week's post-grand final preceding the draft and trade period. So we all need to put our research hats on in the meantime and make sure we know how many bloody list spots we've got and all the rest of it, because right now I wouldn't have a bloody clue.
Well, it's interesting because most of the clubs, or a lot of the clubs, have already done a lot of delistings, and we've had not delistings, guys not offered contracts in terms of senior blokes who coming to the end of their career. Whereas, I think we're not really sure.
Well, I don't think that's true, Mac. Again, I don't think that's true. We didn't do. We left a lot of.
Bloody lie tonight.
No, we left a lot of our delistings until after the trade period last year.
No, that's exactly what I am saying.
No, you said a lot of clubs have already done their delistings.
Compared to other clubs, we do.
No,
we always look.
But a lot of clubs this year haven't. There hasn't been a hell of a lot of delistings so far this year.
There's been quite a few, Fee. There has been quite a few. And, I would say that half the clubs have already made the listings. And we have
too. I would say that their delistings are of the same ilk as ours, players that were absolutely no trade value.
Looking at some of the names, I think that Freo put out, Jesus, there was a no-name brand there.
Well, that's what I just said. They've got absolutely no value. They're the only ones that would be delisted right now.
And Dabo said we haven't done a review yet. Well, we actually have. All the players have done a player review. That was done last week.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
They do their exit. They do their exit interviews before the BNF, don't they? Usually.
Yep, they
Yeah,
do
they do.
that, and then they've got the break, and nobody's allowed to talk to them.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right, Nick.
Yeah, they do it before the last SANFL game because they'll do the reviews for the SANFL players after that.
Yep.
Anyway, and half of our SANFL team are from the Amateur League anyway. All right, I'm cooked. Nikki, Macca, audience,
Well, yeah, 1 hour. Doubled.
1 hour
Yeah.
times 2. It's been a pleasure as always. I was cooked last week, so we didn't do Tuesday Night Live, but Peter, who's probably already asleep right now because he was ticking over quite nicely apparently today, will be joining me on Tuesday night for Tuesday Night Live. Until then, take care, stay safe, and we'll see you later on.
Yep. Night all.
Night all.